Welcome to the Tech Talks presented by Microsoft EMEA together with Intel. My name is Manfred Helber. I'm a Microsoft Most Valuable Professional in the category Cloud and Data Center. And I'm happy to be your speaker for the Tech Talks. We have several topics, and today we will speak about Windows Server 2012 end of support and the impact and the opportunities. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to send them to me via the YouTube chat functionality. So you are watching this live stream via YouTube. There you have a chat or comment section, and there you can send your comments. So maybe your comments about audio and video quality. So hopefully the stream is fine and you can hear everything. Your comments about the technologies, but also your questions. Today we are speaking about the end of support. Maybe you have questions about the product lifecycle. Maybe you have questions about licensing. Maybe you have technical questions about Windows Server. And so I'm happy to receive your comments, like the comment from Sven Langenfeld, who is also watching this live stream. He says, "Hello, EMEA server experts." If you don't want to see your comment here, but you want to send it to me, then please start with your comment with an info, please do not show, and then your question or your comment, and then I will not show it to the full audience, but I will take the comment and answer your question, care about your question. Okay, so let's start. We have 1 hour for my planned content, including your questions, and we will start with the Windows Server 2012 or the Windows Server support lifecycle and the impact of end of support. EOS in our webcast is not end of sales, it's end of support. And when we look at the support lifecycle of Windows Server, we today have 5 different Windows Server versions that are still in support. Windows Server 2012 and 2012 R2 are the 2 versions of Windows Server where the end of support is nearby, because in October 2023, we have the end of support for these 2 Windows Server operating system versions. So it's about 1.5 years, it's about 18 months till the end of support of the operating system for Windows Server 2012 and 2012 R2. And it's important to know about these different support areas in the support lifecycle, because when a product starts, we have typically the general availability. First, we have the RTM, the release to manufacturing, then we have the general availability. With the general availability, we can buy this new operating system via OEM channel, pre-installed as a server or as a ROC reseller option kit option. We can buy the server operating system via volume licenses in the cloud-based subscriptions and so on. We have a general availability in the market. With this general availability, the support starts, the support life cycle starts. And this was for Server 2012 in October 2012, and for Server 2012 R2 in November 2013. Important is to understand that both have the same support end date. Today in the operating systems, Windows Server 2016, 2019, 2022, we don't have this R2 versions, but in those times we had R2 versions, and for the R2 versions, the support life cycle regarding the end of the mainstream support and the end of the support for the extended support was the same for the major release and for the R2 release. The support for the mainstream support already ended for Windows Server 2012 and 2012 R2. So what does mainstream support mean? In the mainstream support, we get product updates, feature updates, hotfixes, security updates for free. So in the mainstream support, we will also see new functionalities for this operating system, for this specific version, if it's required to have them here. Not on the list is Windows Server 2008 and 2008 R2, because these two operating systems are already out of support. They have reached their extended support end date. But in Windows Server 2008 R2, we had a version, a service pack for 2008 R2, where we received in this mainstream support a lot of new features. So we had several situations in the past where we received in the mainstream support a larger number of new features we could use in this operating system without buying a new version. This situation to receive new functionalities, to receive feature extensions is important when you think about hardware. Maybe you want to use a specific operating system on a newer hardware with latest technology where you need some extensions to the operating system. Think about Intel Optane memory, about RDMA networking and things like this. This was not available or very new when Windows Server 2012 started. Today, this is general technology, so it could be interesting to use this technology. But for Windows Server 2012, 2012 R2, we will not receive any extensions. It's still in extended support. In the extended support, we receive security updates and hotfixes. So if anything is going wrong with the operating system, we receive a hotfix. If we have a security issue, we will receive a security update, but no feature extensions. Important is to see that already Windows Server 2016 has left the mainstream support in January of this year. So when you are thinking about end of support, I would recommend you to focus on the mainstream support and also think about your customers and your data centers where you have running Windows Server 2016. My recommendation is to stay with all the workload in the mainstream support, because there you have the best compatibility, the best functionality, and all the updates. For sure, if you want to run your Windows Server 2012 till the maximum end of the support, you will receive all the mentioned security and hotfix updates till October 2023. My two recommended operating systems are Windows Server 2019 and Windows Server 2022. So I would recommend you to migrate your workload to one of these operating systems, because both are in the mainstream support and both have several years on the support life cycle where they will stay in mainstream support and then have additional extended support. If you are thinking about Windows Server, also think about your SQL Server installations, because SQL Server 2012 will also be end of support in July, but already of this year. So Windows Server 2012 is already in the middle of this year at end of support. SQL Server 2014 in July 2024. And here we have the recommendation. I would recommend you to migrate your SQL Server to 2017 or 2019. And also Exchange, we have the situation that the Exchange versions that were highly adopted in the market, like Exchange 2013 and 2016, have already left mainstream support. Exchange 2013 will be end of support in April 2023. And you know the dependencies between the server application and the server version. So I assume many Exchange 2013 installations are running on Windows Server 2012 R2. So for the Exchange servers, it will be not the support end date in October, because you have always to take the combination of server application and server operating system, and the product that earlier reaches the support end date has to be migrated. And if you migrate Exchange Server, for example, to 2019, what my recommendation would be, then the only supported Windows Server operating system is Windows Server 2019. Also, Windows Server 2022 is not supported there, but if you buy Windows Server 2022 for your scenario, you can downgrade to Windows Server 2019. The downgrade is included in the OEM licensing, in the OEM reseller option kit licensing, and for sure also in the volume licensing. So in Windows Server, in each edition, in each deployment channel, you can use a downgrade to a previous version without buying any additional licenses. So you can decide for Windows Server 2022, even if you are thinking about Exchange Server 2019, and migrate or downgrade to the previous versions to migrate to your Exchange Server to Exchange 2019. So what are the opportunities when we think about the end of support? What do we have to think about? What are the opportunities when you are thinking about your customers? The first thing is migrate to new hardware. Because when you think about Windows Server 2012 and 2012 R2 and the start date of these editions and the releases, you will see, even if you started when Windows Server 2016 was already in the market, you will have a hardware that is more than 5 years old. And in the Windows Server situation, so many things have changed regarding the server hardware. So the migration of your workloads from this end of support version, Windows Server 2012, to Windows Server 2019 or 2022, will be a great opportunity to adopt new hardware technologies, like, for example, NVMEs. NVMEs are very affordable today compared to the situation we had in the OS launch times with Windows Server 2012. We have the latest scalable CPU technology from Intel we can use today, where we have huge differences compared to this situation more than 10 years ago regarding the number of cores and regarding the performance per core we can have, and regarding the amount of cores we can have in one server. So scalable latest CPU technology. RDMA support for remote direct memory access to optimize the network communication. The Thunderbolt technology, also in the server market, are systems with Thunderbolt support. The Optane memory or storage technology, if you want to have the fastest non-volatile memory express based on Optane technology, and persistent memory. These are all technologies that were new in the market and that were not fully supported with Windows Server 2012. NVMEs, yes, we could use them. RDMA, we could also use, but with the persistent memory, you have to migrate to one of the newer versions. We have one question here. What is the difference of Optane and persistent memory? The technology for the flash module on the Optane storage devices and the persistent memory devices is identical. So we can have the Optane technology for storing the data in persistent memory modules. The persistent memory modules are inserted in a DRAM slot on the main board. It has to be a specific main board. It has to be a main board with the latest technology, but then we can use the Optane-based persistent memory modules where we have the same flash performance we have for the NVMEs based on Optane technology. But we have the advantage with the persistent memory that we have lower latency because they are closer to the CPU regarding the channels, because they are inserted in a DRAM slot. We can have several of these persistent memory modules. The persistent memory modules know two different modes. Mode one is memory mode. So we can use persistent memory as a cost-optimized option to add additional memory, but we always need some DRAM there to be able to add persistent memory. And the second mode of persistent memory modules is the storage mode. So we can have this DRAM, this Optane-based memory modules with persistent memory, and there we can use them as a storage device for ultra fast, for example, virtual machines or hyperconverged infrastructure scenarios based on Windows Server or Azure Stack HCI. Windows Server 2022 supports both persistent memory in the storage mode and in the memory mode. We have also NVMe drives. The NVMe drives are connected via per PCI Express. We have NVMe drives based on PCI Express with the Optane technology. So we have the same ultra durable storage, ultra fast storage flash modules on this Optane-based NVMe drives, but we don't have them in the memory slot. We have them in the PCI Express slot. This is the big difference, and thank you for your feedback that this answered your question. Okay, hardware is the first big opportunity for you as a partner to provide this hardware to your customer, for your customer to be able to use these latest technologies. When I compare systems I used in the days of Windows Server 2012 R2 and 2012, and these were really also very powerful systems, and I'm using today, there are worlds between the regarding the performance between these different platforms. The next opportunity is to migrate to Windows Server 2022, because Windows Server 2022 is the latest operating system for Microsoft. It's available in your markets, and it includes great technologies to support the migration. Windows Server 2022 is available in 3 editions. We have the Essentials for smaller customers with maximum 25 users and maximum 50 devices. Essentials is identical with the Windows Server Standard regarding the technology. When we are installing Windows Server 2022 Essentials on a server hardware, we are limited regarding the licensing terms to maximum 1 socket, maximum 10 cores, and maximum 1 virtual machine. We don't have any additional limitations, and these limitations are regarding the licensing terms. And I'm always explaining, if the licensing terms specify a limitation, I don't have to think about options if I can expand these limitations, because as soon as I do this, as soon as I use a server with more cores or with more sockets, I will violate the licensing terms. So please stay inside these terms. Usually, it will be the case that the license fits your hardware, because the Windows Server 2022 Essentials is only available via OEM as a pre-installation on Windows Server or as a reseller option kit. So your preferred server OEM should already care about the situation that he says, okay, this server is suitable for Essentials, or this server not, because it has too many sockets, too many cores. And so this should already be clear at the OEM offering process. But if you're using a ROC license, you know that you can order the ROC license similar to other extensions like CPU or memory. So it might happen that you order a ROC license and you don't have a correlation to the server hardware. So please always keep in mind Essentials, maximum 1 socket, maximum 10 cores, maximum 1 virtual machine. With Windows Server, the access licenses are not included because we don't need access licenses here, but we have access rights included for this Essential server for 25 users and maximum 50 devices. Standard and data center are scalable on the same level. Both support 48 terabytes of memory. Both of them support more than 2,000 virtual CPUs. Both of them, server data center and standard, support clustering. For server, standard, and data center 2022, we need client access licenses. So as soon as you migrate a system in your domain to Windows Server 2022 standard or data center, please ensure that the users in this domain have client access licenses with Windows Server 2022 version. The newer client access license can be used to access previous Windows Server versions, but we are not allowed to use a previous client access license version to access newer Windows Server operating system versions. We have some data center only features. So in data center, we have included unlimited virtual usage rights on the licensed host. We have included the storage spaces direct technology to build a hyper-converged infrastructure. And we have included the software-defined networking if you want to deploy SDN in your infrastructure. And we have some enhanced security features for shielding virtual machines. This is helpful, for example, for domain controllers you have virtualized in a hosting scenario, for example, where you have different customers that access the same platform. So regarding the compatibility for your client operating systems and so on, you're absolutely free in the choice if you use Essentials or Standard or Data Center. In all the three editions, we have the situation that we have included Hyper-V. We have one question. Is it possible to have 20 users and simultaneously 30 devices accessing the Essential server? When we assume that these 20 users are using the 30 devices because there are some users that have a laptop and a tablet, and also, let's say, a smartphone that accesses a Windows server needs to be covered by access license when we use standard or data centers, or a user client access license, or a device client access license. And because we don't have the client access licenses for Essentials, Microsoft says 25 users, 50 devices, to ensure that we have covered this scenario, even if each user has 2 devices. What not would be covered if we have 25 users and 75 devices, because each user had 3 devices. In this scenario, we would have to use standard with client access licenses. But if you have the 20 users and these 20 users are using 30 devices, or maybe some of the devices are passive devices that access the server because the user has a client system and he has some technical analytics station where there are temperature values or values from a production environment that are written to the server, then this is fine because we are below the 25 users and we are below the 50 devices. So this would be okay. And what's also the situation, we can use Essentials in a larger environment where we have a department where we have only, for example, these 25 users and maximum 50 devices. So we have this limitation, 25 users, 50 devices, to access the Windows Server Essentials at the same time. If we have a larger environment and some of these users that usually work on the Essential server also want to access sometimes Windows Server Standard or Data Center in the version 2022, they will need client access licenses to be able to access them here. Here we have the situation. No, the scenario is different. We have 20 users with a Windows 10 device and additional 30 sensors, for example. So we have additionally these devices. This is a little bit tricky, the situation. I would say this is not covered because it says 25 users or 50 devices. And in this situation, yes, sorry, it's covered because you are below the 50 devices. But let's say you have 25 users and each for the users has a devices. And additionally, you have the 30 sensors. Then you are above this value because it's not 25 users and 25 and 50 devices, it's maximum 25 users and it's maximum 50 devices. In your very special scenario, we are exactly at the 50 devices limit, and this is fine. But if you have 20 users and 35 sensors, or 25 users and 30 sensors, yeah, then we would have the situation that also these users need a device, and then we have 55, and then we are above, and then we have to go to standard and data center. Yeah. Hopefully this explanation was understandable. If not, we can discuss this further now directly if you add some information to your question or at the end of this live stream. Okay, yeah, this was understandable. Great, perfect, yeah. Okay, yes, I mentioned Hyper-V is in each version of these Windows Server editions. Why this is so important? In Windows Server 2019, there was a version that was called Windows Server Hyper-V Server, the Hyper-V Server version 2019. And this Hyper-V Server version 2019 is still available, but there will be no version 2022. And many customers think now they lose something in Hyper-V, but they don't lose anything because we have in each of these editions Hyper-V included without additional costs. And with the full functionality, we don't have any additional Hyper-V features in the Hyper-V server. It's vice versa. In the Hyper-V server, we have the situation that we have no full production support because the Hyper-V server is intended to be used in evaluation scenarios, in lab scenarios, in training scenarios, and so on. Because as soon as you have one virtual Windows server running in production on your Hyper-V or a different hypervisor, you need to license your physical hardware. So it's important to understand that we have Hyper-V in Windows Server 2022. In each edition, we can install an optimized Hyper-V configuration, but there's no dedicated Hyper-V server in the market. Hyper-V supports Windows Server workloads and Linux workloads. They are both best supported. So I really would recommend you to use Hyper-V independently from your workload. It works if you are using Windows Server workload. It works if you are using Linux workload. And we have a lot of management tools. I prefer Windows Admin Center, but we also have the PowerShell. We have the traditional tools like Hyper-V Manager and Failover Cluster Manager that can still be used in Windows Server 2022. And we have the System Center Virtual Machine Manager, but Admin Center, PowerShell, Hyper-V Manager, Failover Cluster Manager are included in the operating system. The System Center is an extra license for the System Center suite, and this includes the System Center Virtual Machine Manager. When we look at the Windows Server licensing, this has not changed compared to Windows Server 2019 and 2016. But if you think about the end of support, Windows Server 2012, you might see customer scenarios where the customers are not familiar with the new way how to license Windows Server since Windows Server 2016. Because when you think about how was Windows Server 2012 and 2012 R2 licensed, then in those days, we were focused on the server and on the socket. We had the situation that the customer bought a server license, and this included 2 sockets on the licensed server. Microsoft didn't care about the cores. Since Server 2016, we are looking at the server and at the cores, not primary at the sockets. The sockets are also involved because we have one rule for licensing such a system, that we have to license minimum 8 cores per CPU, not per socket. So if you have an empty socket, let's imagine you have a 2-way server with 2 sockets and only 1 socket is equipped, then you don't have to care about the second socket, only the first one. But what is important additionally to the 8 cores per CPU, we have to license minimum 16 cores in a physical server. So this means in this 2-socket machine where only 1 socket is where we only have one CPU in a socket, we have to license 16 cores minimum. If the CPU has 8 cores, we have to license 16. If the CPU has 12 cores, we have to license 16. If the CPU has 20 cores, we have to license 20 cores. So with Windows Server 2022, and this started with Windows Server 2016, we don't have really Windows Server licenses per server. We have licensed Windows Server cores per server. So it's always important to ask how many cores has the server if you want to have a correct licensing for this specific machine. You will not be able to have an accurate licensing for a specific server if you don't know how many cores the server has. So the number of cores is important, and the number of virtual machines is interesting, because Windows Server 2022 standard includes 2 virtual Windows usage rights if we have the hardware correctly licensed. If we license the hardware 2 or 3 times, we have 4 or 6 virtual usage rights. If we have Windows Server 2022 data center, we have unlimited virtual usage rights. What does this mean exactly with Hyper-V? When we install Windows Server 2022 without Hyper-V on our physical hardware, we have something like we can see in this graphics here. Windows Server 2022 is installed on some drives directly on this machine. We can start Windows Server 2022. We can configure the system as a file server, domain controller, whatever we want. But we can also decide to activate Hyper-V on this machine. And when you activate Hyper-V, please do not activate any other roles there. So Hyper-V is selected here. And when we select Hyper-V for the installation, we will see this hypervisor layer here. This hypervisor, the Windows hypervisor, will be provided exactly at this layer. It's installed after we have installed our Windows Server operating system, but it's not on the top of the server operating system, where we maybe could expect it because it was installed after we installed Windows Server. No, the hypervisor will be here. And this is, you can see this when you install Hyper-V, because your physical host operating system you installed previously is restarted twice, and it now will reside at this virtual layer in the so-called parent partition. This is a specific VM. This is the VM where you connect to when you are managing an Hyper-V host via remote desktop. And then we can create our virtual machines with the Hyper-V Manager or the Windows Admin Center. And what we see here is exactly what is included in the licensing of Windows Server 2022 standard of the physical host. So if our physical host, let's imagine, has 10 cores, this machine here, let's imagine it has 10 cores, and we have licensed 16 core standard, then we have the usage rights for the parent partition, including Hyper-V, and these 2 virtual machines here with Windows Server operating system. This can be Windows Server 2022, but this can also be one with Server 2022 and one with 2019, 2016 because of the downgrade rights that are included. If we license the hardware twice, we have 2 additional virtual usage rights. And we license the hardware 3 times, we have 2 additional virtual usage rights. And when we license the hardware with Windows Server Data Center, we have unlimited virtual usage rights. If you are interested in how to migrate to Windows Server 2022, today we are talking about the concepts, about the opportunities, about the impact. On the 11th of April, so today in 1 week, we will have another tech talk, and there we have the focus on live demos. How to migrate to Windows Server 2022. In this live demos next week, you will see how to migrate file servers, how to migrate domain controllers, and how to migrate your Hyper-V workload to Windows Server 2022. And you can watch this tech talk next week at exactly the YouTube channels where you are actually watching this Tech Talk. So let's talk about Migrate to Azure Stack HCI or Azure, because when you visit the Microsoft Migration Center, this is a web page. It's accessible for you and for your customers. You will see a lot of opportunities when you migrate to Azure. So, but many customers are a little bit struggling with this Azure migration because they have to change a lot of their networking related configurations and networking access related situations to be able to run this workload directly in the Azure data center. But the interesting thing is about moving to Azure, you will receive the extended security updates without any additional costs. For sure, you have to pay for your workload in Azure, but the extended security updates are included so that in Azure, you still receive today updates for Windows Server 2008, and you will receive extended security updates for Windows Server 2012 R2, and so on. The extended security updates are available when the extended support date has ended. I explained you the meaning of mainstream support, and I explained you the meaning of the extended support end date. What I didn't explain till now, there are different channels where you can buy additional support here. The important thing is the mainstream support and the extended support both are free if you have a valid license for Windows Server. The extended security updates can be bought additionally via subscription, and they are included if you move your workload to Azure. So they are included for the first year, for the second year, for the third year. You can see for Windows Server 2008 and 2008 R2, we are actually in the third year here. We will have this extended security updates for Windows Server 2012 and 2012 R2 when it comes to end of support here. And for Windows Server 2008 and 2008 R2, we have the exception that we also have a fourth year, so another year, so that we will have the end of support in January 2024. This is a great opportunity for you when you have the situation that maybe a customer is not be able because of software compatibility, because of other technical issues to finalize the migrating within the support lifecycle period. But as I mentioned, maybe it's not possible for every customer to migrate to Azure. So the important thing is to know that there's a relatively new operating system from Microsoft. It was announced in December 2020, so it's in the market for 1.5 years actually now. This operating system is called Azure Stack HCI. Azure Stack HCI includes two messages in the product name. The first one is at the second position, it's the HCI. So Azure Stack HCI is a hyper-converged infrastructure operating system. So Azure Stack HCI includes all the technologies we need to build a hyper-converged infrastructure. So compared to a traditional layout where we have our SAN systems, where we have storage fabrics and the hypervisor systems and the networking devices, we have the situation that with Azure Stack HCI, we are using industry standard servers. And this is the great advantage. All the technology we have seen before is available. NVMe, Optane technology, persistent memory, RDMA, Intel scalable CPUs, and so on. So the latest technology usually can be used in the industry standard operating systems. In a hyperconverged infrastructure system from Microsoft or from other vendors provides a powerful software stack to provide the software-defined storage, for sure also the hypervisor, and the software-defined networking. Azure Stack HCI can start with 2 servers minimum. The smallest deployment for Azure Stack HCI today is 2 servers. It's a cluster. It's a high available configuration. When you're working flash only, you can have 4 drives in each server. Additionally, some drives for the operating system. When you are working in a hybrid deployment where you have flash drives and hard disk drives, you need minimum 2 flash drives and minimum 4 hard disk drives. More drives are always possible. So you can scale with the drives, but you also can scale with the nodes. So maximum 60 nodes per cluster are possible, and we can have up to 4 petabyte storage for this Azure Stack HCI. So the second part of this product name is Azure. And the interesting thing at this Azure product is that we have the situation that this Azure Stack HCI runs on premises on your physical hardware. So you have this operating system on your site installed. It looks like Windows Server in the server core installation. But from the technical perspective, it is Microsoft Azure. And because Azure Stack HCI is Microsoft Azure in your data center, you will receive extended security updates there without any additional costs. This means when you migrate your workload, we discussed the migration to Windows Server. We have seen the migration website from Microsoft with a screenshot where Microsoft says when you migrate to Azure, you will receive extended security updates without any additional costs. And we have the same situation on Azure Stack HCI. This is a great new opportunity because now you can migrate to Azure in your data center. And this is new with Azure Stack HCI. This was not possible before we had Azure Stack HCI. And today we can use this on-premises technology. Now you will wonder what is about the licensing of Azure Stack HCI, and there's a comment from Sven Langenfeld. He also says on Azure and Azure Stack HCI, extended security updates for Windows Server 2008 and 2008 R2 has been extended to January 2024 by 1 year. This is exactly what I highlighted here in this slide, and I can highlight this again. We have 1 additional year. I didn't add this to the table here because it's an exception. We cannot be sure to have this for Windows Server 2012 and 2012 R2, but we have this additional year for this version so that we have the support till January 2024 for Windows Server 2008 and 2008 R2. Yes, so it's a great opportunity to use this on premises. Now you might wonder, how does this work? It's connected to Azure, but it's not required that you have an internet connectivity all the time. So if you are afraid because maybe your internet connectivity is sometimes interrupted, then your Azure Stack HCI will keep up and running. All your workload will keep up and running. You will still receive the extended security updates, but for sure to receive them via Windows Update, you need an internet connectivity. So they have to be downloaded from Microsoft. Azure Stack HCI has to be connected to Azure minimum once every 30 days. So these advantages we receive with Azure Stack HCI, we always receive for 30 days when we are connected to the internet. So a very untypical scenario, but let's imagine you have connectivity to the internet once a month, then you will always see when you connect, now I have for the next 30 days the Azure Stack HCI benefits or advantages. Azure Stack HCI itself, so this operating system that provides the hyperconverged infrastructure and the hybrid technology, is kept up to date via monthly updates, and new feature updates we have once a year. So every new year we will have an update. Because Azure Stack HCI is a subscription, we don't have to pay extra for this update, so the new versions are included. The pricing for Azure Stack HCI that includes the extended security updates and many, many more additional hybrid features is $10 per core per physical month. We have the situation that we can test Azure Stack HCI for 60 days without any additional costs. So the first 60 days, also when we use the workload productive there, is without any costs. After these 60 days, we have costs of $10 per physical core per month. They are calculated per day. So if you change your amount of CPUs and you report this to Azure, it's very easy via Windows Admin Center. It's one click. Then you can increase or reduce your amounts of cores you are charged for. Because regarding the hardware, you can enable and disable CPU cores. And this is also possible in combination with the subscription-based billing for Azure Stack HCI, the consumption-based billing. It's not the virtual CPUs, it's not the virtual cores, it's not the logical CPUs. So if you enable hyper-threading on your hardware, you will have much more performance on the hardware, especially for Azure Stack HCI, but also for Windows Server. But we don't have any additional costs, only physical active cores. We have no core minimum. In Windows Server, we have to license the 16 cores minimum per hardware. Here we are charged for the active cores. Important is to know that we have included the extended security updates in these costs, but we don't have included the virtual Windows Server usage rights for our Windows Server. So if we want to run virtual machines with Windows Server on our Azure Stack HCI host, we need additionally Windows Server licenses. This can be Windows Server standards within stacking, like I explained before, or this can be Windows Server data center per physical host to have unlimited virtual usage rights. If you are running virtual Linux machines, you don't have to care about any additional Microsoft licenses for these Linux machines. So if you want to consume this extended security updates in virtual Windows servers on Azure Stack HCI, you need the Azure Stack HCI component. And additionally, you have to ensure to be licensed for Windows Server. There are different ways to be licensed for Windows Server. Because relatively new, it's possible to have a Windows Server subscription on Azure Stack HCI. So you can go to the Windows Admin Center portal where you manage your Windows Server, and then you can decide to choose the Windows Server subscription. Then you have an additional fee per physical core per month. Then you have unlimited virtual Windows Server usage rights without buying a Windows Server license, but you are paying for this Windows Server usage each month. The other option is to use a bring your own license. We're using bring your own license. You can use the technology automatic virtual machine activation in providing your data center keys you bought for your Azure Stack HCI hosts to unlock virtual usage rights for Windows Server. The automatic virtual machine activation is also available if you are using the OEM license. And as you know, the OEM license of Windows Server has full functionality, has all the features in there. The OEM license is cost optimized, available from your preferred hardware vendor. And your preferred hardware vendor also offers the certified systems for Azure Stack HCI. Because important is to know about Azure Stack HCI that the solutions in the market you will find on microsoft.com/HCI are tested and validated from the OEM hardware partners based on a standardized validation tool. If you are a volume licensing customer, you can also use the key management services, the KMS, to activate your servers and to use the licenses from your volume licensing agreement. When you have one of these licensing choices for your environment, Windows Server subscription or AVMA or KMS, then you will find or you can activate the Azure benefits in your Windows Admin Center portal for Azure Stack HCI, and so unlock the extended security updates, but also many more additional services on Azure Stack HCI. When you activate the Azure benefits, it looks like this. So you can decide on a per VM basis if you want to have these extensions or if you don't want to have these extensions. And these are many more than extended security updates. We have the Windows Server 2022 Azure Edition that can be used. To be able to use the Windows Server 2022 Azure Edition, you have to keep in mind you need an additional software assurance to your Windows Server license, or you have to choose for the Windows subscription via Azure. The Azure Edition is an extended version of Windows Server where you have hot patching. So on patching with nearly no impact for restarts. We have an extended networking for Azure connectivity, and we have an ultra-fast networking transport, the SMB over QUIC. We also have the free extended security updates. This is what we were focused on, because with the extended security updates, we receive these ISO updates for SQL Server and for Windows Server, not only 2008 and 2008 R2, but also Windows Server 2012 and Windows Server 2012 R2. So recommendation is to ensure that your environment is always covered by security updates. If you are not able to migrate till the end of the extended support, extended security updates can help you. Azure Stack HCI is a great opportunity to use these extended security updates on your on-premises, in your environment, in your data center with low latency, with a local network. There's also an option to subscribe for extended security updates without Azure Stack HCI. You will find this in the Windows Server Migration Center. But when you read the details, you will see that this is only available for customers with software assurance, and they will need an enterprise agreement. So it's not available for the typical SMB customer. It's not available for the customers that don't have a software assurance. And it's not for free for these enterprise agreement customers with software assurance. So the extended security updates, if you want to purchase them in a traditional way, the costs are relatively high. You can compare it to buy a new Windows Server license each year, but you don't buy this new license based on the extended security updates. But let's come to my recommendation. My recommendation is still keep your workloads in mainstream support, because if you keep your workloads in mainstream support, then you never have to think about the extended security updates. And if you keep your workloads in mainstream support, you will see that the migration to a newer version is always a very easy thing with nearly no impact. So this year is my recommendation to stay here. If you have to go for the extended security updates, then my recommendation is to have a look at Azure Stack HCI, because there they are included and you can keep your workload on premises. And if you are interested in how to migrate your workload to Azure Stack HCI, I can recommend you our Tech Talk on 25th of April on the same YouTube channels you're actually watching, because there we will focus on migrating to Azure Stack HCI, and there we will also see live demos about how to do this. And if you like to be able to ask questions about Microsoft technologies, then I can recommend you to join our Tech Talk Ask the Expert session, where you can send in your questions about Microsoft technologies to me. We also stream to the same YouTube channels we are streaming actually, but at the Tech Talk Q&A, You have 60 minutes for your questions related to Microsoft technologies, related to licensing, related to hardware requirements, related to technical how-tos, and so on. So you're absolutely welcome to be part of this Tech Talk Q&A and ask your questions, like we had several questions also today in the call. But today I mentioned it's great to receive questions about the technology we are speaking today. Windows Server 2012, 2012 R2 end of support. In the Tech Talk Q&As, you are absolutely welcome to also ask questions about Windows Client, about Office, about cloud technologies, and so on. So this is the end of the Tech Talk for today. So thank you, Murray. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your questions. I will stay online for a few minutes if you have additional questions or feedbacks. In 1 week, at the 11th of April, we will have the Windows Server 2012 end of support migrate to Windows Server 2012, as I mentioned, with many live demos. At the 21st April at 10:30, we have the 60 minutes for your questions related to Microsoft technologies. And at the 25th of April, we have the migrating to Azure Stack HCI with many live demos. So you're absolutely welcome to join this call again. The call next week and in 2 weeks is the same time we had today. And the tech talk for your questions, the Q&A is on 21st April on 10:30 standard Western European time, and depending of your time zone, I'm happy to see you there. I'm happy to help you with your questions there. So thank you for your time. Thank you for joining the Tech Talk. And if you have some final questions, feel free to put them into the chat. Feel free to put your feedback into the chat. And then let's see us in 1 week to talk about the migration to Windows Server 2022 and see some live demos about how to do this. Thank you for your time. See you next week. Bye.